Candilejas, teatro y espectáculo con César Vidal.
We're back for this special interview of the Friday night. You know that this is a very special interview, not because of me. It's a special interview because the people who are guests to be interviewed in this program. And last week we had a very exceptional experience, so exceptional that we decided not to end in a definite way the interview, but had a second part this week. We had as guest Amy Neustein, and it was so incredible, it was so touching, it was so moving, everything she told us. Then we decided, well, Amy, you cannot say farewell to us, you cannot say goodbye to us, because we have a lot of things to talk with you. It's incredible that she's a scholar in sociology. It's incredible the way that she has add the experience to the scholarship and the results. You know, if you have listened the first interview, the results are really incredible, are amazing. Well, Amy, dear Amy, welcome again. And we're going to keep with our interview. We have this first interview last week, and we're going to keep talking about these things we were talking last week. We were talking about a lot of things last time. We were talking about the sex abuse within the Orthodox Jewish communities. We were talking about how there's even not only sex abuses, but also an influence in media, in the law administration, that makes that these kind of felonies are unpunished. We were talking about the influence in the media. And we were talking also even about a sex trafficking business, a children sex trafficking business that at least in part was used to fund, to support the settlements of the state of Israel in the West Bank. Even in the last minute, we were thinking about the parallels, because this situation right now among the Jewish communities and other situations in the past, in the Jewish history, and how this must make us to think about the fear of God, about the righteousness. There's a thing that I was thinking last week, and I should like to know your opinion about this. You were talking about a kind of a self-victimization among some Jews, about some communities. Well, it's totally real, and I want to know your opinion. It's totally real that, for example, right now, the Gaza war is not watched in the same way among, well, Jewish communities and a good part of the non-Jewish communities. In the Jewish communities, I'm telling not that in the totality, but in a good number of these Jewish communities, everything that Netanyahu and his government is doing in Gaza is legitimate, is just, is righteous, is the thing we must do. But outside this background, many persons are telling, well, these Jews have forgot what was the Shoah, what was the Holocaust, and are taking behaviors that are not the behaviors that we wait from you. What's your opinion about this moral problem?
Correct. I've noticed this for many years. I'm 66 and a half years of age. I was born in 1957. So I've had a good amount of living to do. And I am seeing something very, very frightening in my lifetime. And this is what I'm seeing. There is a messianic fervor, a messianic spirit among the Orthodox community, where they want to return to the biblical borders of Israel, which would include Israel reoccupying the West Bank and have Israel totally take over East Jerusalem and the settlements. And I understand from whence that comes, because the Holocaust was the most extreme, most atrocious, horrid affliction in the history of mankind. There is nothing that compares to that. The Spanish Inquisition was terrible. Jews had, when they were killed in the Spanish Inquisition, most people don't know, they just hear the word Spanish Inquisition, but the limbs were twisted off of them when they were killed. And they were burned. That's how they were killed, like witches burned at the stakes. We're talking about brutality of the worst kind. The Holocaust was much worse because it was premeditated. It was strategized. It was planned. And it involved many countries in Europe in cooperating with Germany on the genocidal extermination of Jews. It was extreme. And what happened was, and I say this with love in my heart, I'm not saying this because I want to shame anyone, but why am I talking about this? Because I'm Jewish. And I see Jews suffering. I suffered terribly. I'm a childless mother. It is almost 40 years that I don't have my child. I did nothing wrong. My daughter loved me. I loved her. The court said she was well nourished with me, a happy, healthy child, but she had to be taken from me because she was sexually abused by her father, and she was seen as an easy mark for sex trafficking. And all the evidence of child pornography was put on the record by the New York State Legislature in 1993 when they held a hearing, a whole day hearing with whistleblowers from state agencies testifying to the sexual abuse of my daughter, the cover up my daughter, and the sexual exploitation of my daughter. And the hearing came about because the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had an offshoot called Children's Rights of America. They prepared an extensive documented report on the sexual exploitation of my daughter. And after the hearing, they wrote to the Child Exploitation and Obscenity section at the U.S. Department of Justice saying this child has been groomed for child erotica and it must be investigated. And the Fed sent Janet Reno sent two of her top deputies down from the Child Exploitation Obscenity section to meet with me for 3 hours. And they said, we'll go forward. And then suspiciously, nothing happened. The whole case just dissipated in thin air, which has been happening over and over again because I've seen and time again interference. Anyway, I just don't want to lose my train of thought here because there are just a lot of things that, but ask me your question again so I know that I'm on course with your question. You wanted to know? Hello?
Yeah, of course.
Question, because I got sidetracked with, and it's very emotional for me when I think about my daughter and what happened to her, my brain goes into that mode and it's hard to get back into the mode as the researcher and the analyst. So you wanted me to address as to, yes, why this is happening, the post-Holocaust era, correct. So in the post-Holocaust era, what I'm seeing is that messianism, saying in order to survive, in order not to be extinguished, we need a very strong Israel. That messianism that was born in the throes of calamity, unfortunately, becomes fused with identification with the aggressor. Why? Because the victim who now takes on the role, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to save. I'm going to do whatever it can. So I'm going to go into overdrive to do that. In order to get from the victim state to the savior state, they have to turn the tables of victimhood where they're no longer a victim. And what's diametrically opposite victim? Oppressor. So it's inevitable for victims to become oppressors. Here's a statistic. Sexually abused children, particularly boys, they become sex offenders when they're adults. So sexually abused children will become sexual offenders to other children when they reach age of majority. It's very common in prisons where those who commit crimes have been victims of crimes as children. So victims become oppressors. That is human nature. So what's concerning me is that the victims of the Holocaust, it was horrid, it was atrocious. It's only 80 to 85 years. I know we think it's a long time, but it's really not a long time. So we're going through the phase now where the victims of the Holocaust are not becoming, they are acting. If you sex traffic a child, my daughter almost died. My daughter had atrophied organs. All the doctors, all the reports clearly state that she was the most emaciated child they had ever seen. My daughter received no medical care. Few days leading up to my rushing my daughter to the hospital, the nurse saw my daughter in class trembling because her hypothalamus in the brain was no longer working from the severe starvation. So as a result, she was trembling back and forth. She was just trembling because she couldn't warm up her body. The nurse said to the principal, "I'm calling 911. This was Flatbush Yeshiva. I'm calling 911. It's a good school." And the principal, who was a fine person, said, "You can't do that. You can't do that." Because a certain assemblyman who is very active, where he has settlements all over the West Bank, and he's on the government's list because he was alleged to be responsible for half a dozen bombings of Arab American targets. And he was prosecuted by the federal government for financial crimes. Anyway, he was on the board of Flatbush Yeshiva, or very close to board members, and he determined that my daughter was not allowed to get medical care. So I rushed my daughter to the hospital. A few years later, my daughter lost another 11 pounds. And what did the city administration do together with the Orthodox community? They took a living child and they put my daughter before the fatality review panel of the Child Welfare Administration, or the Human Resources Administration, the name of the parent group. They put a living child before a fatality review panel because they didn't want my daughter to live, and they wanted to have an alibi for her, a good alibi for her when she dies. Now, that is becoming an aggressor. And in no uncertain terms, the Shonda report, written by author Michelle Etlin, is 80 pages. It's the same number of pages as the case before Israel, before the International Court of Justice. South Africa's case is 80 pages. The Shonda report is 80 pages. The Shonda report shows the crime syndicate in Brooklyn that is sex trafficking children to feed the West Bank settlements. It's in the Shonda report. And if you want to access it, the host will give you Michelle Etlin's contact information. She's the author of the report. Based on all this evidence of what is being done to children, sex trafficking children, my daughter in the hospital was scratching her arms and legs down till she bled. She was mutilating her body and saying, "Please, I just want to be normal like every other child. I don't want to live. I don't want to live." This is what was done to a beautiful, healthy, happy child. She was made into a very depressed, very angry person. And in the hospital, my daughter had amnesia. She had dissociation because she doesn't remember me. I lost her when she was 6. I took her to the hospital after she spent 2 years in the foster care, sex trafficking, and then with her father. She was 8.5 when I last saw her. When I took her to the hospital, my visits were terminated permanently because my daughter threatened to reveal the pornography her father and this OHEL Children's Home and Family Services had gotten her into. So she was threatened that. And as a result, I lost my visits with my daughter. And everything that went wrong in my case and in other cases, Henny Cooperstein, she's public. She's all over the internet. She wasn't allowed to see her children. Her children were sexually abused. I read the reports. I read all the psychological reports. I read the transcripts. The children were sexually abused. They had to live with the father. And then they got involved in sexual activities, according to the mother. So there's sex trafficking. And the mother is eclipsed from the life of her child. And as we speak, there are hundreds, there are thousands of Orthodox women who could never be with their children. Now, my daughter suffered amnesia. In the hospital, she totally wiped out any memory of me because she threatened her father to reveal the pornography. She thought she'd feel safe in the hospital. And what happened? She went straight back to her father. And the agency that was trafficking her, Ohel Children's Home, they ran to the hospital. They ran to the hospital to keep her quiet, to make sure no one would talk to her. And when she was discharged from the hospital, she wasn't allowed to see a doctor, a pediatrician, or a psychologist. Only Ohel could. They could keep a lid on the sex trafficking. They could keep it a big secret. This is becoming an aggressor. These are Nazis. These are Jews that have gone from victims to aggressors. When I lost Sherry, the social worker chastised me, scolded me, because my daughter at age 6 didn't know as much about the Holocaust that she should have known, according to the social worker. My daughter knew the word. She knew there was an atrocity that happened to Jewish people. She knew about it. She knew that my family and I were very sympathetic toward it, but she didn't know enough. And the social worker said to me, in no uncertain terms, she said she was a Holocaust survivor. She said she was the daughter of a survivor. Her name was Elaine. And she said to me, we had a Holocaust? You're going to have a Holocaust. In that Brooklyn accent, you're going to have a Holocaust. That's what she said to me. So she became an aggressor. And this is what's going on in the Jewish community. They're ripping each other apart. They're stealing each other's money. You think Bernie Madoff was an anomaly? No. You have thousands of Bernie Madoffs. They convince poor people that have maybe $10,000 in savings to put money with them. And everyone who's rich knows that the person that's pulling all this money in has speculative and very chancy and unstable real estate dealings and other kinds of dealings. And the person who's brought into it is not part of the inner circle, so they don't have money, so they don't know the dealings. And they're being told they're going to get a 9% return on their money, and they never get their money back. So they're stealing from one another. They're harming one another. It's an exact replay of the time leading up to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, where they stole from each other, where they hurt one another mercilessly, and God showed his anger. This is what we're happening now. The Jews from the Holocaust who were victims, they've become perpetrators. They've become aggressors. Case in point, one case after another. It's all over the internet. There are articles on abuse, harming, financial crimes, physical abuse, women who were terrible victims of domestic violence. You look at Bernard Bergman, the number one, he is known as the icon of nursing home abuse. What happened to his daughter-in-law? His son's daughter suddenly fell off the terrace. She fell off the balcony. Everyone knows what happened. There is
Amy,
a lot of yes.
yeah, I was thinking when I was listening you. Well, I was having remembrance of my childhood. I was remembering a teacher I had in high school that has passed during the Spanish Civil War, and he was threatening always us, telling that you are going to have a civil war. I remember this man when you told about this woman telling you're going to have your Holocaust too. I think there are persons that, well, it seems they enjoy the idea of other persons suffering the same things that they have suffered. But I was remembering too, well, probably the most important philosopher of Israel and one of the most important philosophers in the history of Jews, that was Yeshayahu Leibovitz. And Leibovitz has created the word Judeo-Nazis to call Ariel Sharon and other persons that were the protagonists of the murder of scores of innocent Arabs in the West Bank. In one moment, Ariel Sharon, he was younger, but he has commanded a troop to murder the people of a small village in the West Bank. They were only civil people. They were only, most of them were women and children. And Yeshayahu Leibovitz has told, well, you are Judeo-Nazis, and this is not a democracy, because in a democracy you don't murder from the power innocent people, and in a democracy you cannot tolerate torture, and the torture is legal in Israel. Well, of course, Yeshayahu Leibovitz was a man that knew very well the Bible. He wrote a lot of articles and books referring the Bible, the study of the Torah, etc., etc. But there was this idea that you have forgot really what the Holocaust meant. Do you think that they had forgot what the Holocaust meant, or they have incorporated the mentality of the offenders, the mentality of the butchers in the Holocaust?
Yes, well, exactly. It's the latter for this reason. Victims traditionally feel guilty about being victims. They blame themselves because as human beings, we all want to feel strong, and we all want to feel, that won't, if you hear that your friend is being victimized, you'll say, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. You always create these scenarios why you wouldn't become a victim. And when a person becomes a victim, it's very natural that they end up blaming themselves for being a victim because they feel weakened. They feel weakened. To survive, we have to feel strong. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a civilization. So there's a natural tendency for a victim to blame himself because the victim is vulnerable. The victim was conquered by the victimizer, obviously. So they blame themselves for having been victimized. The easiest way psychologically to extricate yourself from victimhood is to make someone else a victim, is to become a perpetrator. This is the easiest way to do it. And this is what we're seeing now in the post-Holocaust era, with the cruelty, the stealing from each other, the throwing bleach in the face of this Rabbi Nuchem Rosenberg, who tried to protect sex abuse victims, as was reported in Vice magazine by Chris Ketchum. The sex trafficking of children, putting my daughter, a living child, before a fatality review panel, being so cruel to me, taking my advocate, Dr. Leora Rosen, who was in Washington at the time my daughter was getting married, and she begged the rabbis to allow me to come to my daughter's wedding. And the rabbi said, oh no, she's terrible. She can't come to her daughter's wedding. And what happened to Leora Rosen? She was expelled from the synagogue in Washington because she championed the rights of a victim. She was protecting me. She was supporting me. She was someone who she co-authored the book with Michelle Letland, The Hostage Child, Indiana University Press. Thereafter, she has written with Professor Joan Myers from George Washington School of Law, and is an extraordinary scholar who writes prolifically, a brilliant woman, and she's not allowed to hold a siddur, a religious prayer book. She can't go to a shul, a synagogue, because she was championing my rights to be with my daughter at my daughter's wedding. So what's going on now is that it's only 80 to 85 years since the Holocaust, and we're seeing something extraordinary in the world at this moment. Jews are in a fishbowl. It's the first time in history that what Israel's doing is now all the Jews throughout the diaspora are being forced to account for this, as we saw with the anti-Semitism and the pro-Palestinian rallies and all the invectives hurled at the Jews on the college campuses. So basically, Jews in the diaspora now, for the very first time in history of Israel, which is 75 years old, are being forced to account for what their brethren are doing in Israel. And every Jew is now in a fishbowl. Because of that, I am an optimist. I feel because the whole world is now studying Jews. They're all studying them with a microscope, from South Africa to Malaysia, all the countries that signed on to the petition that South Africa brought before the International Court of Justice, and Brussels and all the countries in the EU, United States, Canada, all over. Tempest in the Temple, which is the book I wrote. Every 2 hours, I get I get an update from academia.edu, from that website, showing me all over the world, in the Caribbean, in South America, in Central America, in Asia. They're all trying to get a hold of Tempest in the Temple. And I have many copies. So if anyone listening to this wants it, just email me at amy.neustein@verizon.net, amy.neustein@verizon, verizon.net. I bought up copies, and I'll be happy to give them who want to read it. Anyway, the Jews are in a fishbowl now. Because they're in a fishbowl, they're going to have to self-correct and examine themselves. And that's good. I'll tell you why. The Jews are truly the chosen people. God chose them to be moral. God chose them to do the right thing. The Jews are not ever to be held by the standard of the rest of the world. So to say, oh, well, the Gazans are starving, and this is happening, and that's happening. Well, other people do the same thing. Look at 80 million deaths in India under British rule. And yes, I do want to say this. What Hamas did on October 7th was the most extreme butchery I have ever learned in my lifetime, presently happening. Not something I learned in the history books, but something presently. It was of extraordinarily horrific what they did. They engaged the most lawless, the most brutal gangs to do to commit the most heinous crimes. But that does not give the Jews a pass. They are the chosen people, and they have to use this opportunity to introspect, to examine their ways, and to correct their ways. And they're because they're sex trafficking children, because they have to get money for those settlements. And who occupies the settlements? A bunch of ne'er-do-wells. Some of them are educated. Many of them are running away from student debts. Many of them are running away from bad credit cards. They go to Israel, and they're given gorgeous apartments in the West Bank. It is being subsidized off the bodies of children. My daughter's body had to be used. I had to give birth to a child so that the Jews in the West Bank have to have beautiful homes and apartments. Anyone in my position would have killed anyone who would have done this to them. But I'm civilized, and I want to see a better world for the Jews. And I want to see the world study the Jews. They are doing it now. This fishbowl is a very positive thing, because when people are studying you, then you have to study yourselves. And this business of we had a Holocaust, you're going to have a Holocaust, that doesn't cut it. And stealing from thy neighbor does not cut it. This has to change. Otherwise, I fear that it'll be the end of the Jewish world, and it could happen quicker than we think. And I will tell you, many of the Orthodox that are involved in embezzlement and crimes, they know it's their end. They know the end is coming because they know what they did wrong. They are guilty, and they know it's the end for them. They all feel that these are the dark days, the last days of Judaism. They feel a darkness around them. Those who are good, they don't feel it's the end. They feel this is a time of transition. They feel this has got to be used as a time of change. But those who
so that if I understood you well, dear Amy, you are telling that the doctrine of election doesn't mean that you have the permits and the authorization coming from God to do anything I want, whatever I want, but it's a call to be a moral example to the rest of the world.
Correct. Jews are chosen because God chose them to do the right thing morally. God chose them because this is the group that I'm singling out to be the paragon of kindness, the paragon of honesty. I'm choosing you to lead the way as a template. That's what God chose Jews for. And that's why the whole world now is watching the Jews. The Jews are in a tremendous fishbowl, and it's not Israel. This is so unusual. We're going through the most unusual epoch in the history of the Jewish religion, because in the past, what Israel did was what Israel did. It didn't affect Jews in any part of the world. Now every Jew is being asked, being told, being called upon, and being forced to account for what's going on in Israel and what went on in Israel all these years. They're being forced to learn their history. And that is probably why I'm getting a lot of queries about Tempest in the Temple from Tel Aviv and from Jerusalem. There, every 2 hours, I'm getting the update from academia.edu. Anytime anyone goes online to Google Scholar, what have you, and they try to get that book, it records the city that they're doing the online search from, and a lot is coming from Israel. So it's because I think Jews in Israel say, "Hey, what is going on? We want to self-correct." And I have a lot of hope for the Jewish community. I know they're going to turn this corner from darkness to light, but they have to stop protecting the evildoers. And they have to stop saying it's anti-Semitic to talk about what we're doing, because doing that allows them to continue to perpetuate the crimes against humanity, crimes against themselves, crimes against each other. Allows them to continue to perpetuate, because do you understand that in terms of deviance, one is cruel toward the outside world. That's understandable. Not that I say it's right because of xenophobia. But when it gets to the point where Jews are cruel to their own, what they did to me, Dr. Amy Neustein, what they did to me, the life they gave me, what they did to my daughter, depriving her of a mother. They destroyed me. They destroyed my daughter and her in-laws. Dr. Desmond Lockman from the American Enterprise Institute, and before that he was with the International Monetary Fund. He told Michelle Etlin, the author, who begged him to allow me to come to the wedding, he opened his mouth and the Talmud came out of the mouth, and he used Talmudic expressions to chastise her, to condemn her, that he left her trembling and in tears. That's what he used the Talmud for. Dr. Desmond Lockman, my daughter's father-in-law, who's continuing this cabal of criminality, not allowing my daughter to have a mother, but he can't have a grandchild because my daughter can't hold a baby. This is going to come out. The Talmud says the truth sprouts from the ground because it's irrepressible like energy. You cannot stop the truth from coming out. And if the Jews can do this to their own, then they have reached a level of moral degeneration that is so low that I fear for them, because it's understandable to be bad to the Gazans. It's understandable to be bad to strangers. But when you kill a Jewish child, you kill a Jewish mother, and you do it not just to me, but to Henny Cooperstein and to Miriam Popak and Marsha Rimland, and I'll give you one name after another. You do this to other Jews, then that shows where you are on the moral continuum. You are at the lowest level of immorality if you harm your own kind. That's the litmus test for being far gone.
Maybe, well, I'm totally sure that after the first interview and during this second one, people is totally convinced that you are a woman of convictions, a woman that is very brave, a woman that is walking in integrity. I must make one last reference to your fight against injustice, because we have been talking last week and this week about injustice. I have heard that you have defended mistreated tenants risking family problems. Sometimes I think, well, Amy is looking for more cause to defend, for more battles to fight. And I listen about this, that you defend these mistreated tenants, and this was to run a risk of having family problems. How did that story go?
Okay, it happened when I got a call from a medical doctor, a female medical doctor, to say my niece had come in to see her, and the doctor was terribly worried for Sandy's life because she had 9 broken ribs and a broken sternum, and she could hardly breathe and was in terrible condition. And she told the doctor what her father had done to her, and that's my brother. And the doctor called me and said, "You must save your niece from your brother." So I was getting it from the doctor and from the neighbors. They're urging me as an activist to help my niece. So I went to the police. I went to the DA's office. I said, I have to help my niece. I want to help her. And when I learned the power that my brother had, so wealthy. My brother used to buy antiquities in Israel, and his good friend was Moshe Dayan, and the both of them would compete for antiquities. So you know the level of finance that he was in. And I saw that I couldn't help my niece with getting her the kind of intervention she needed. I disappointed the doctor. I disappointed the niece. I then went to a city council person in New York. I said, I'm really trying to get some intervention here. And they looked my brother up and they said, my God, look at all his assets. He is, and then they looked at the number of violations. They said, he's New York's number one slumlord. So I said, oh my God. And they started to tell me about it. And they put me in touch with Bill de Blasio, who was the former mayor of New York, who at that time was a public advocate. And de Blasio told me, his aide told me, his deputy, that they were getting a lot of calls from tenants of my brother, and that the tenants were complaining that there were rats, broken glass, fire hazards, no hot water, no electricity. There was one lawsuit after another because there was an elevator operator whose knee broke because he was walking on the stairs internally in the building, and the stair just pulverized, it just cracked in a million pieces, and he went down, and he was never able to walk again. There was a garage door that had clipped the neck of a person, and he was in trouble too. He was terribly disabled as a result. The de Blasio's office is telling me, my God, we don't know what to do. So then they got me in touch with city council. They said, what creative ideas can you come up with to rein in slumlords? I said, I have been helpful with getting family court reform, and I got a federal bill into committee views, which is a precursor to federal legislation. So I think I have a little expertise. So I mentioned to them, why don't we do this? Why don't you enact a law that if a slumlord has X number of violations, if it reaches a certain level, they go to jail. So you're a scofflaw, basically, because you're not heeding the violations, not like traffic tickets. They use the word scofflaw. So if a person is a scofflaw in real estate, they should be penalized with jail if they reach a certain level of violations. Well, based on that legislation that I helped to introduce, my brother, thank God, and he had 5 agents, 5 different departments. There were drug dealers in his apartments. There were drug fights going on all night long, and there were gunshots that were going off, and the kids couldn't sleep. These were dire conditions imposed on the tenants. As a result of my efforts, my brother did correct his ways, and he went from the top of the list of the worst slumlord possible to, I guess, middle of the list. He improved because of my efforts. And I received emails from tenants and from advocates. They didn't know how to thank me. And one tenant said to me, I feel so healed talking to you, because all of the sorrow I had with your brother. And she explained how the garbage wouldn't be picked up and the rats would get to it. That was her punishment. If she complained about fire hazards and lack of hot water and lack of heat, she was penalized. So no garbage was picked up. So she got the message. She deduced she was being penalized. And she said all that changed once I became an advocate for tenants. So I did that years ago. I'm not doing it now because I was accomplished. I truthfully don't look for these bellicose and difficult challenges. I really don't. My niece, I love dearly, and I hear from her now all the time. And I know she's struggling a lot, and she's a good person, a very fine human being. And I really adore my niece. And hearing from her doctor the condition she was in, and the doctor had told me that after the ribs were broken, the doctor claimed that is terribly overweight. He's about 250 pounds, if not more, and he's 6'2". So that was very scary. And the doctor told me that was unable to walk. And instead of my brother having sympathy for her, he'd push her and say, "You slowpoke. Why don't you walk? Why don't you walk? You walk so slowly," because she has Asperger's syndrome and she's living in the house. She has problems. whether it's Asperger's or whatever it is. She's in the house. She's a lovely girl, and the doctor was very concerned about her. So I took care of that. That chapter is closed. I haven't been involved with tenant activism for, oh gosh, a good 10, 15 years. That was earlier on. I am interested in making reforms in healthcare. That bothers me very much about healthcare problems. But truthfully, I don't look forward to these quests. It's not a peaceful life, and it's not pleasant. But sometimes you have to step up to the plate because I'm Jewish. And the Jews have chosen to do the right thing. And as a Jew, I have to do what's called tikkun olam, which means repair and correction of the world. Being a Jew is a very heavy burden I carry. Trust me, I wish I had not been born a Jew some days, because being a Jew is a tremendous responsibility. I'm responsible for my neighbors. I'm responsible for the world. And I'm responsible to act as a member of the chosen people, which means I must be an example for humanity. And I must hold myself back from doing the wrong thing. If I should ever think, of doing the wrong thing, I can't imagine what I would do that's wrong. But it's a burden to be a Jew. It's a very heavy burden I carry. But God made me a Jew, and I'm a descendant of the most prestigious Hasidic dynasty. I'm a direct descendant of the Rishon Rebbe, who was the number one, was the head person in the Hasidic movement. So, and my father was very prominent. He was a very prominent rabbi and the first principal of Flatbush Yeshiva High School. So this, based on my heritage, and I take being a Jew very seriously, and that's why I have made social changes. But truthfully, I'd like to spend the next phase of my life doing technology that I love very much, and maybe making some changes in healthcare, but not taking on these very difficult quests. They're very hard, and it's not pleasant.
Amy, last week I mentioned that I have enjoyed your books very much. Not only they are books written from the heart, they are also very socially useful books and very well documented, very well written too. Are you now on a new book?
Yes. So I'm writing Moral Schisms When Institutions Defy Jewish Law. And it's about a total break in morality. The concept is that when an Orthodox person is involved with embezzlement, involved with domestic violence, involved with sexual abuse, involved with sex trafficking, how could that person be religious? So your average person will say, well, that's hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is a very simple answer. It means that there's a dissonance between what you believe and what you say on the outside. That's not the answer. It goes much deeper it's a moral schism. It's a total break in morality. And I'm looking at, for example, I have a chapter on what I call the Akedah guilt complex. Akedah is the Hebrew word for Isaac being sacrificed. He wasn't sacrificed. Abraham listening to God, bringing his son Isaac, and he has the knife, and he's going to now sacrifice him on the altar of God. And so Akedah refers to the sacrifice that didn't happen to God. And but however, the Akedah is happening now, because any woman whose child's been sexually abused and destroyed by it, suicidal, etc., their parents whose children have died of suicide or starvation, illness, etc., from sex trafficking. And the parents are told by the powerful rabbis to be quiet, not to shame the Jewish community, to take the loss of the child. So basically, the rabbis are telling the mother of the deceased child to sacrifice her child on the altar of community greed, basically, because the community is greedy and they need the money from the child, from the exploitation of the child. The mother has to sacrifice her child to the greed of the community. So the community is engaging in sacrifice, and they're using the mothers from divorce, who are the weakest on the social ladder. They're the lowest rung because they're divorced women. They have no power. No standing, no status. In fact, on when they go to synagogue for Yom Kippur, during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, where do you think the divorced women are seated? They pay full price for the seats. They never sit in the sanctuary. They're put all the way in the back. They're put in the balcony. They're put upstairs because their status is low as divorced women. So the children are sacrificed. The children of divorced women are being sacrificed. So the community is engaging in the Al-Qaeda guilt complex. They're guilting the women into making them feel they have to sacrifice their children for the betterment of the greed of the community. And that's a moral schism. And I'm very confident that a lot of Jews are going to read this book because, again, I'm an optimist. And I feel that Jews want to correct their ways. They don't want to be evil. They know they're being punished now. They know the whole world is looking at them in a fishbowl. They know that this is God's wrath that's coming at them. They know what they've done, and they know that this is their punishment, and they are going to correct because Jews are the chosen people, and they want to be better, and they're going to correct their misdeeds. I just know it. I feel that they will. I don't feel, people have said to me, aren't you afraid you're going to be assassinated? No. Never enters my mind because I feel the strength of God. God doesn't want me to be assassinated. God wants me to talk and to expose and to write. And someday the Jews will say, gee, we knew Amy Neustein. She was our neighbor. Gee, we knew her. I don't feel they're going to kill me. And they haven't killed me thus far, right? So why would they kill me now? All these years they haven't killed me.
Yeah. Well, Amy, we have arrived to the end of our second interview. I'm totally convinced that we could keep chatting during hours and hours, but you know that we must put an end to this interview too. I thank you very much indeed for the time that you have given to us. I think you have been very kind, very nice, very generous with us and the people that are listening this program. I think that they have enjoyed a lot and that you have given them a lot of material to think, to see a new perspective, to have new ideas about these problems that are very, very delicate. You know, because this is the second interview that I say farewell, thanking the interviewed people with music. And I have decided in this second interview to have for you a song of Gentle. You know the story of Gentle, the short novel by Bashevis Singer.
Correct.
That
Yes, of course. Yes,
that became a movie with Barbara Streisand.
correct.
And I have decided to chosen this song entitled A Piece of Sky. I think that you watch also the sky, you see a piece of sky, and you see the hope of a future that will be better.
Yeah.
And well, I think so, and I hope that you had been not too uncomfortable with us. We thank you very much, your time and your kindness. And thank you very much, and God bless you, Amy.
It's my
Shalom Leitraot.
Thank you so much. We'll see each other again. Thank you.
El programa La Voz es una producción de Artorias Incorporated y al amparo del derecho a la libertad de expresión no se hace responsable de las opiniones vertidas en el curso del mismo.